So I'm Schaffer, and welcome to my class. And I think we're running a little late because I was on a panel just now, so I'm going to just boom. All right, so we're talking about analyzing your character. In my opinion, there's nothing worse than reading a book and realizing that your writer doesn't know their characters, right? When they're behaving in a way that isn't consistent or doesn't make sense, right? So we're going to talk about a few ways where we can avoid that as you're writing. Okay, so we all know the shy kid. Wow, look how digital it got when we blew it up. It's amazing. The happy kid, right? And these are all just basic, whatever. You can be as generic as you want. The brooding loner, the geeks and the nerds, the cocky mean girls. You guys seen this movie, right? Mean Girls, right? We all knew girls like that. I beat up girls like that. The moody, depressed one, right? We all know girls like that too, huh? Jessica, your favorite, right? Okay. The rebel, that wasn't me at all. Okay, so those are stereotypes, but we don't want to just write stereotypes. Yes, we want characters with different personality traits and everything, but we want to breathe some life into them by making them do unexpected things that aren't totally random. So even the unexpected things that they do should make sense with their personality, right? Okay, so this picture is pretty random because Batman and a stormtrooper are playing football. But in some universe, in some book, that scene would make sense if the writer does it right. Okay, so the easy part is deciding, first of all, when you're deciding who your character is, deciding who the protagonist is and who the antagonist is. All right, your main character, the person who gets in the way, whatever. Is the main character always a good guy? Is your protagonist always a good guy? No. Can you name some movies or some books where the bad guy was the main character? Megamind. That's like one of my favorites. You? Huh? What? Breaking Bad. The bad guy is the protagonist. Absolutely. Why are you watching that? Fantastic. Okay. So yes. So you can have a little fun with that. Your main character doesn't have to be some perfect hero, right? It's just the main person. You're telling your story through their eyes. Boom. And also, as you're fleshing out your characters, you're not going to have time to give every single character an enormous backstory or give a lot of time. You have to decide as you're writing characters if they're your static character who stays the same through the story, the dynamic character who changes through the events in the story, a flat character who we don't know very much about, but they're kind of the funny sidekick or something. And there's an appropriate place for that. You don't have to go super deep into every single character that you create. That would bog down the story. And then the round character is the character which we know a lot of information about. We know about their background, what their likes and dislikes are, everything. We're in their head, right? So we have to decide which characters we're going to dive into, which ones are important to the plot before, don't go crazy on all your characters and waste too much time with them. Okay. So you cannot make your characters known to your reader before you know them. You have to know your characters if you want the people who are reading your book to get who they are, right? So we're going to go over some steps on how you can know your characters. So have any of you ever heard of nature versus nurture? Okay, do you know what it means? Can you tell me?
It means experience, it's like how a person is.
How a person is.
Versus how they're raised.
Versus how they're raised. Yeah, pretty much. So somebody's nature, how they just innately are, and then how their environment might affect them, okay? And so a lot of people, there's actually a big discussion about this in the psychology world, how much contributes to who, whatever, and in my opinion, they both do in a big way. So we're going to look at that, and as you're building your characters, keep those two things in mind. So can somebody read this for me? Who would like to hold the mic? Thanks.
The route through childhood is shaped by many forces, and it differs for each of us. Our biological inheritance, the temperament with which we are born, the care we receive, our family relationships, the place where we grow up, the schools we attend, the culture in which we participate, and the historical period in which we live. All these affect the paths we take through childhood and condition the remainder of our lives.
What a fantastic voice you have. I like this quote because it covers pretty much all the bases that we should keep in mind as we're making our characters, and we're going to kind of go through each of those things. So, temperament. Think Cain and Abel, right? Same environment, same parents, essentially, right? But one turns out one way and one the other. Why? Right? So you have to make sure your character has an innate temperament that would be there no matter what, which is kind of a tricky, that's the fun part. You get to decide, who is this person? Aside from all the other aspects in their life, who is this person? And also, like, I put up the giver because Jonah, he was raised in an environment where everything was the same and everyone was treated the same, but he was different. There was something different about him. Can you guys remember what was different about him? Who read this? He could see color, right, in a colorless world. And that was just his thing, right? Okay, DNA. DNA plays a part. I don't know if any of you have read Ruby Red, but she, because of her DNA, can travel time and stuff like that. So there's going to be certain traits because this is my best friend, and his DNA is doing him all kinds of favors. Okay, let's just move along. And then there's family. Your family totally affects who you become and who you are, right? Here's two classic families. And how different would Bart be if he was the little brother of the Little Women? Do you think he'd be a little bit different, his personality? I think probably. And he wouldn't have a skateboard. So maybe not as exciting. And vice versa. What if Joe or Meg were in that family? Okay. Place. The place you were born, the place you're from, right? You know, obviously, anyone know who that is? What this is? Right. How much of being a hobbit and living in the Shire and living in that little hole affected who he was and how he felt about the world? A lot, right? Okay. And him, he wouldn't be that awesome if he hadn't landed on Earth because everybody in Krypton was the same. So his place of origin made him who he is, and then the place where he lived and grew up also made him who he was. And then your school affects who you are. Anybody read Vampire Academy? Right, okay. Harry Potter, his school. How much did his school affect him? A lot. What if he was still living under the stairs? None of that would have happened, right? So yeah, in his case, his school played a huge role in who he became and who he was. Your culture totally shapes who you are too, right? And we know a lot of examples of that. Katniss was the walking embodiment of what would happen if the world was that bleak. And Ali Condi, who's here, she's here now in the building, she wrote her Match series, and that's another thing where the culture plays a big part in the book, and it affects who the characters are. And the historic period in which your character lives also plays a part. This is one about Helen of Troy, nobody's princess, kind of cool. And Relic, she's in the Old West, but she can like travel time or something, right? Renee Collins is here. How many of you went to her class? Awesome, awesome. Anyway, so yeah, definitely the time period you grow up. What you guys, I mean, your little devices and everything that you can do in this time, if you were born 50 years ago, you'd be a little different person. It does affect who you are. So what we want to do is take all those aspects. Okay, I have this up here because I'm obsessed with Buffy. No big deal. You want to create strong characters, keeping nature and nurture in mind, all those things we just kind of went through. So if you haven't ever really considered that before, think about that. Those are all things that you can think about, like how is this going to affect my character? These different things, okay? All right. Yes. Backstory is a big deal. And your main character is the round character that you really want the reader to know. You want to give them a good backstory without info dumping. You guys understand by now you understand what info dumping is, right? I'm seeing that most of you, the older kids. Okay, that means you don't start the story saying, this is so-and-so, they're 6'2", they have blue eyes, la, 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 their mom thinks this, their school's like this. Don't ever do that, or your reader will stop reading, for one thing, but also it's not doing your character any favor, because then it just seems like he's this laundry list of things instead of a person, right? So as you're building a good backstory, you want to make sure it's woven into the plot and into different scenes, right? Okay. I'm cruising fast because I think I'm behind. Am I wrong? All right. So make sure that your character arc ties in with the plot. So if there's a lot going on with your character, whether they start out as like this just happy person and then something bad happens and then they're sad and then something triumphant happens or whatever. Make sure that their emotional well-being and their emotional place matches what's going on in the plot. It has to matter. It should push the plot forward. It shouldn't be just some weird random. It has to do the story and the plot and the characters. See how they're all boom. I'm not gonna. You can see it, so I'm not gonna talk about it. But so basically, the two have to make sense, because really the plot. I mean, the plot's important and the character's important. But if they don't jive, then it's gonna be weird and not as good. Okay. Also, I know, isn't that cool? So your character needs to have some kind of internal struggle, right, to make them interesting. And it can be small. It doesn't have, and not everybody has to be in some dire, situation or anything. But they should have something they either want, right? They have to have something that they want, or something that they don't want, or something that they fear, or something. You need to figure out what the emotional obstacles are to your character, because what their obstacles are will tell your reader a lot about who they are, right? And does the character change or grow in the plot? I seriously have a hard time reading books where the character seems the exact same at the end. And that's just my personal whatever. But if they haven't changed at all, they haven't had some kind of epiphany or knew something, I feel like I just wasted my time. Even if it was an interesting story, I'm like, what? They didn't learn anything from that? I feel like they need to learn and grow in the book. So that's never really a bad idea. Okay, so the other thing is, how do events affect your character? So you have this plot and you have these things that happen. Okay, and one of the ways to show your reader who your character is to show how they react to the events around them. Some people, okay, we'll go with this. So a spider bites your character. Does it have a negative effect or a positive effect? And right, like that. So how does it move the plot along, right? Does it create a phobia or a villain, this event? Or does it create a strength? Like, this person has learned, so they're ready for the next time it happens, or they've learned something that will help them in their lives, right? Sorry, it's totally cheesy, but it made me laugh. Or a hero. And actually, spiders freak me out, make me run away. And that's true, because when I was in 6th grade, I woke up with the hugest spider bite on my leg, and it made my leg numb for about a week. Ever since then, I'm freaked out by spiders. So I am the case where it didn't make me a hero, it made me a free cat. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, so those are the basics, the nature, nurture, how does the plot affect your character, how does your character affect your plot. Now we're going to talk about a fun way that you can, if you're having a hard time wrapping your head around how you're going to be able to get your characters, like see them clearly and who they are, there's something called the color code personality test, and you can access it online. And if you just answer the questions as if you were your character, you're going to get a really good, strong idea about what motivates them. The color code test is more about motivation, and that's going to affect a lot about your character. So, because what one type would do in a given situation is not going to be the same as another. So these are the 4 categories when you do the color code: red, blue, white, and yellow. And you can kind of just look at those. We'll talk about them a little bit. So those are the basic 4. Reds are motivated by power. So what are some good characters in books that you can think of that were motivated by power? Voldemort. Yes, thank you. What? Loki, absolutely. Who? President Snow, yes. Good, those are all good ones, exactly. So of course, because they're motivated by power, that's going to affect the choices they make in any given scene. So maybe in a scene where if they need power more than anything, and someone comes to them and says, oh, whatever is happening is really scaring me, or I don't like what you're doing, they're less likely to be like, oh, I'm sorry, because they don't really care about your feelings, they want to have power. So it's really important to know what motivates your characters. So is it power? Or blues are motivated by intimacy, meaning relationships. So with a blue, if you said to them, this is upsetting me, or I don't like this, instead of going, well, too bad, I'm in charge, they'll be like, oh no, I hurt someone's feelings, let's talk about this. Because I want to have a relationship with this person, I want to have a friendship, I don't want to mess that up, right? So, and of course these are generalities, and everybody's a little mix of everything, but you want to at least know the basic of your characters. And whites are motivated by peace. So a lot of times they tend to be passive aggressive. It doesn't necessarily mean they are peaceful people. They could be like raging on the inside, but they don't like confrontation. And so they'll say whatever to get everyone to shut up and calm down, right? And so, so that's whites. And yellows are motivated by fun. Exactly, thank you. SpongeBob fan over here. So, so with yellows, if any of you ever known a yellow, they're irresponsible. They show up late to everything, but they're so fun to have around. You kind of forgive them because you have to, because they make you laugh. That's a yellow. And not a lot you can say or do is going to make them do anything they don't want to do, because if it's not fun, they're not really very interested. And I actually have people in my family like that, and it's really awesome. Okay, so I'm going to turn a few minutes over to my son Gabriel to tell you about a class experiment they did based on the color code.
Oh, okay, so my health class, my health teacher, she had us, all the students, take the color code test, but before she explained what the different colors' motivations were, so we were just taking it, and then we resulted, oh, I'm majority blue. What does that mean? You know, I'm blue. And then and the next day we came back to class, and she segregated us into our dominant colors. So we had a blue group, a yellow group, a white group, and a red group. And we all had blocks, and we had to work together as a team to build an airplane. And it was really funny seeing the results. Afterwards, she described what our motivations were, and the red team, like they couldn't get along. They were all fighting for who was going to be like the leader of building the airplane, so they all like built their own. And then the yellow team just sat there and they built a helicopter. They were just random. And then the blue team they were all, you know, high-fiving each other. Everyone was like, good job, and they got the best one, and most coordinated. And then the white team, they just all sat there quietly as one kid built it. So, but it was really cool. Yeah.
Thank you, Gabe. So I think that illustrates really well how, I mean, it's a real thing. And they did that not knowing what their color meant. So it's not like they were, you know, they had some kind of power of suggestion working in the experiment. So the next thing, if you want to take it to the next level, if that's not enough to generate like all kinds of information for your character, there's something called the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and that is also online. You can find that. And what it basically does is it breaks down, there's 4 different categories, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but not a ton. So a character's approach to problem solving, relationships, and crisis can be mapped using the Myers-Briggs type indicator. So the basics are, okay, so the first category is energy. If you're an extrovert or if you're an introvert. So decide which is your character. So are you more jazzed and energized by being with people and collaborating and going out with friends, or being curled up at home with a book, relaxing, having your own space? You know, they're different. One's not better than the other, but they're definitely different. And some people are a combination of both, and you might have days where you feel more like an introvert. But you kind of want to know with your character which way they are, you know, either way. Where do they get their energy? Where do they gather their energy? The other one is attention. So the S's are sensing. They focus on facts, practical, and proceed step by step, which that's not me. No, sometimes it's me. And intuition, and it focuses on possibilities, theoretical, and proceeds of things. So rather than having does anybody know someone in their life or in a book that you could say is someone who just walks the line and has to do everything step by step? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. You do? Yes. How about a character in a book? Anyone come to mind? Hermione, right. Methodical. How to get the straight A, has to do it by the book, right? My son Gabe. Yeah, there's people like that, and that's great. Thank goodness there's people like that in the world. You know, like just even in running this conference, you know, I might be intuitive and have creative ideas and woo and whatever, but thank goodness there's a couple other in my group that are like, well, okay, now let's map this out and put some steps. Otherwise, we'd all just be here like, wee, throwing candy, and there'd be nothing accomplished. Talking about books and having a great time. Right. And then, so anyway, so you kind of get the idea, right? Got that? Got that? Check. All right. Let's go to the next one. Boop. Or not. All right, go. Decision making. So the letters for that, because they break it down to a category. You're going to end up, your character or you, whoever's taking the test, is going to end up with 4 letters, and that's what these things are that we're talking about. So thinking, T, makes decisions according to a logical system based on consistent principles, believes in justice, right? So black and white thinker. Now, of course, these are generalities. That doesn't mean, and for feeling, it makes decisions according to a value system based on a desire for harmony and believes in compassion. That doesn't necessarily mean that a T never has compassion or that an F doesn't ever use logic. These are just what their preference would be, right? Okay, lifestyle. So judging proceeds toward goals in an organized way, likes to make plans and come to decisions. Perceiving adapts to life in a spontaneous way and likes to gather information and keep options open. And there's a lot of times where if you're reading a book, if you don't get what the characters are like, now why would they do that next? That doesn't necessarily mean the writer wrote it wrong. It just might mean they have the opposite personality as you, and so what they're doing is annoying you because you wouldn't have done it that way. Okay, so anyway, this is just like the basic. If you're an ISTJ, you're doing what should be done, blah, 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 blah. This, you don't have to like memorize this or read this. This is just showing the types. If you end up with those 4 letters, that's the basic sort of like personality type that you are. How are we on time for real, though? I have what? Okay, great. Okay. The Myers-Briggs. Write that down. And actually, you guys want to probably look that up online. Would be good. Yeah, James.
I was on this writing website once, and I was talking with a bunch of different writers.
Do you want to?
I don't know. Okay. I was talking with a bunch of different writers just on this forum who had all taken the Myers-Briggs, and it was very interesting how similar just writers were in general. We were all very close to the upper left-hand corner. What that means, I have no idea, but it was just very intriguing to think that writers have the very similar personality.
And that's probably true. I think probably in a lot of professions, you're going to see a certain type gravitate, right? And with writers, for the most part, it's kind of a solitary endeavor. So maybe predominantly writers, it's not like a leap to think that a lot of them might be more introverted. Not necessarily. It doesn't mean they don't have friends or don't like to go out with friends. But there's something about being alone and writing a book that a super, super extrovert could probably not do for very long, very comfortably, because it is so solitary. You're kind of in your own little world in your own little head. So that's a good point. You're going to see that. In fact, some people take this test to find out kind of what profession they would be most comfortable in, kind of college courses, that kind of thing. So it's used for a lot of different things. When I was going to BYU, I can't remember which of my classes, but one of our classes, they made us do this. So. This keeps going to sleep, and then I have to recode it. Sorry. Okay. So how many of you guys like Sherlock Holmes? Okay. I'm going to have one of you read this because somebody did the Myers-Briggs for Sherlock Holmes. Who would like to read this? You want to do it? Thank you.
Content to live a solitary life or to socialize with a single roommate, Holmes is galvanized to action by problems that challenge his mind. Acutely aware of minor details in his environment, the detective repeatedly cautions that one must not theorize before having facts, and he solves puzzles by refining tired and true methods. His primary motivation, besides entertaining his brain with intricate puzzles, is to achieve justice. His rooms are disorganized disaster area, and he fills his days with a variety of interests, scientific experiments, playing the violin, taking drugs, all for as long as they are interesting.
So he's ISTP. See how they put the letter in with the line that corresponded? So if you even just changed one of those letters, he'd be a slightly different dude, right? So there's a pretty decent combination, like there's a variety of combinations of things that you could be. And of course, they're not all the same. I forgot I had Candy here, so who just did something? You did something, right? You did something. Sorry, James, you did something. James! Hey, Gabe, you did something. Bam! Who else did something and I totally neglected you? You did something. Okay, you did something. You asked for candy. Okay. All right. Okay, so you want one? All right. Good for you. All right. As if you haven't had enough sugar today, all of you. By the time we get out of here, you're all going to look like extroverts and yellows. Okay. All right. Okay, so now obviously all these things that we've talked about, the nature and nurture, and their backstory, and where they live, the historic aspects, yeah, I know. All those things, and the Myers-Briggs and the color code, they're a great way to kind of get down to who your character is. But you don't want to make a cookie cutter either. So it's not like, you don't want to swing so far that it's stereotype. That's why I think it's good to try a couple of the tests and then make sure you have a backstory, because the more that you know your character, the less likely they're just going to be like, oh, just like another character. And on the panel in there a little while ago, one of you guys asked, how do I change the fact that every time I write something, my character's the same person? Right? Do any of you have a good answer for that? How would you change that? If you find yourself, every time you write a story, the narrator sounds like the same person, what do you do?
I throw in a bunch of different quirks for each person and just play off of those because one little quirk can change an entire personality.
Yeah, awesome. Good.
I like change the little steps. Like I go as deep as like what their favorite color is, what their eye color looks like, and just stuff like that. And then it all starts to revolve into this totally new person.
Good. Someone back there? My mic doesn't reach. Tell me something and I'll say it in here.
Take whatever character you think that you think you're repeating too much, and just take the complete opposite of that and see if it fits in the story.
Okay, so make an opposite of the character that you've usually done. That's cool.
I like to go and write in the park and stuff, and so I find different strangers and I base characters off of what they look like and just look at them and come up with different traits that would look best for them.
Awesome. I'm a people watcher too. How many of you are people watchers? Totally. I've had ideas for stories just based on being somewhere public and watching something weird happen.
Even if you have problems starting with the same character, imagine putting that same character through a different background, and it should change them because they're experiencing completely different things. If you even start with the same character, by the end of the story, if they're different stories, they should end differently.
Exactly, and that's kind of what I was talking about when I said that by the end, there should be some change, right? Your character shouldn't be the same person at the end of your book. If they are, maybe that's not that interesting of a story. It should have some impact.
I might change who their family members are or their friends, who they hang out with.
Good. You with my shirt on.
I think of it kind of like you're an actor. So it's like we've all taken like a drama class. And so you take those 5 minutes to get into your character, then I write like I'm that character. So you take it like acting.
That's a really good idea. Actually, my sister's an actor, and we've talked about this a lot, how writing is a lot like acting, because you have to get into your character, right? I mean, I've written about murderers, and I'm not a murderer. But you have to get into their head and why they think what they think. And for me, when I was writing that particular story with the murderer in it, I kind of took some of these steps, not totally down the line because I'm not one of those people that takes lots of steps. I'm the idea person. But I did examine what their background was or what some of their childhood experiences were and why would they be someone who likes to kill people or what would drive them to that, right? And so that's something that when you think of it as acting, it's true. Anybody agree with that? That's kind of a cool, right? Yeah, I think it is. I think writing is a lot like acting. So some of you might not ever be like confident on stage or in front of a camera, but when you're alone with your book, if you can channel a character and become that character, that's acting. Something back there? Right. That's good. She said that because if we do tend to be more introverted, we might not be comfortable writing about characters that we don't know, people we don't know. So definitely draw from the people you do know. A lot of my characters are based on people that I have met or who I know. Yeah, there you go. He said take your standard person and abuse them differently.
Abuse them through backstory,
Yeah.
abuse them through the situations they go through, and you will end up with
Yeah, good point. Good. Yeah. Yes.
I just take someone I don't really like or that don't like me, and I put them in a situation. No, I make them in such a way that of things that I would like them to do or like them to act like.
Oh, I like that. How many of you use your writing as a catharsis for yourself? Like if someone's treated you wrong, and I'm going to rewrite that scene, what should have happened, what that person should have said to me, right? That's actually a cool way to look at it. And that's a great way to get your character to do something. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna just say this, like, I do this for all of my scenes and all of the moods and stuff, but like, say that I'm writing a romance scene or something like that in my book, then what I think of is I think of what I wish would have happened in my own life, and it doesn't. And so I've already got the fantasy going on inside my head.
Nice. Did you have something? So she said reverse the situation, make the good guy the bad guy and the bad guy the good guy. And I always like stories like that where you find out that there's a side to the villain that you could actually sympathize with. Doesn't that make the villain way more interesting? Like nobody just wants I'm a big mean guy. I mean, when you find out about their past, like even with like Loki, if we're going to talk about him again, knowing what his past was, you kind of get why he's a little tweaked, right? And why he feels, not that it's okay, but you get it. And that makes him almost likable. Did anyone else find themselves liking him? Yeah, guilty, yeah. He's cute for one thing, but he's a little deranged, but in a cute way. Okay, did you?
Yeah, like with some of the characters, I have to stop myself from making characters just to knock off or are based off of people in real life. Like, so yeah.
Yeah, you don't want him to be a carbon copy of someone, unless you're, getting revenge of some kind. So basically, this picture is illustrating the cookie cutter we don't want to do, and then the awkward family portrait. You want to give your characters personality and quirks and not make them just like everybody else. Even if you are kind of following a basic background with either the Myers-Briggs or the color code or in examining their nature-nurture, you still want to make them feel new and different, right? Okay, so somebody, I guess, did the test on superheroes to see what they would be. Yeah. So yeah, look that up. That's kind of interesting. Tony Stark. Who likes Tony Stark? What? He's so awesome. I know. What a jerk. I love him. Yep. I could go on and on about each of them, but I won't. So basically, you could take any character, boil down their traits, and kind of get like a feel for the kind of person they are, what motivates them, right? Okay. So this is kind of a funny thing. Somebody went to a real clinical psychologist and gave them a short background on a character, an actual character. And she did an analysis on them. So I want someone, you guys, well, let's have someone, does anyone feel comfortable reading this aloud? It's a lot of big words. Yeah, read this.
What I'm hearing from him is that the primary conflict here, in all aspects of his life, is the dilemma between passivity and action, a fear of his own action, but also guilt of his inaction. I think therapy with him would really focus on getting a sense what makes him of this dynamic. Also, we'd revisit and work through the trauma with his uncle. It sounds like he avoided doing that and only come up with the narrative that he's at fault for allowing this criminal to escape. So we try to contextualize that more for him so he can forgive parts of himself that didn't choose to intervene, but then also motivate engagement in other parts of his life where it makes more sense.
You think it's Hamlet? You think it's Harry Potter? You think it's Spider-Man? Let's find out. Boom, Peter Parker. Nice. Okay, we have another one. You want to do another one? All right. Okay, who wants to read this one?
He'd be an unlikely dude to stumble into therapy. It sounds like you're describing someone who's not experiencing much remorse or universal attributes like compassion. So we'd likely maybe not see him inside the walls of my office. But should he come through my door, it sounds like he, very early on, learned to associate his own fears with danger. He seems like he then gets his rocks off later in life, inducing fear in other people and putting people in that state, almost to do away with any sort of processing or realization about his own needs. He just turns into a predator and puts fears in others, which is very retaliatory. I also think it's a coping mechanism to no longer really be in touch with the vulnerability of his own fears.
Okay, who is that? What'd you say? Is this supposed to be Batman! Yeah. He's a psychopath, honestly. He's extremely unstable. He's a hero, but really, if you think about it, he's messed up in the head. And in talking about that, I have a couple more of these, but I was going to say, as you're writing your character and you're trying to kind of shrink them on the couch and figure out who they are, you want to probably familiarize yourself with kind of common issues like anxiety, depression, PTSD, those kind of things. Kind of know what those are so that when you're writing your character, you know what they do when when those are their traits, how do they behave, what are they doing in a given situation. It's just more ways to kind of flesh out your character and why they do what they do. Okay, do you want to do another one? I think I have. All right, who wants to do
You hear a lot of her focus and her conjecturing about other people's hurt, whether that's emotional hurt or sometimes it sounds like there have been physical actions or accounts that have been hurtful. But I think with her, I would be very curious about her own hurts and pains. Intimacy is a two-way street, and she probably has all of the stuff that comes up internally for her when she gets close to someone, and it seems like there's such a focus in magical thinking kind of way that her closeness does things to other people. I think I'd want to support her own exploring of what comes up for her when she gets close and what her experiences are of making herself vulnerable. I try to help her focus the shift onto herself.
Who do you think that is? Could be Katniss.
Wonder Woman.
Rogue. Rogue. Yeah. Okay, I think I have one more. Okay, we'll do, I think, one more. I think I have one more. Did you want to read this? Thank you.
I think for this young man, there are parallels of being a part of two worlds. The core of the therapy would be about him helping integrate both the nature, where he's originally from, and the nurture, how his adoptive parents raised him, how his adoptive parents raised him. The part that he feels he's learned, and the part that he feels more in his core, which is generational heritage. These issues are complicated by the push and pull between an adoptive family versus a biological family. One of the ways someone can work through this is by trying on different identities for size, which could result in a real amplification of those attributes or traits, almost like a kid playing with masks.
Okay, I'm hearing Harry Potter, Superman. Isn't it interesting how many people like come to mind? See, psychology's true. Okay. Ta-da! Hottest guy in the universe, worst movie in the universe. Right?